tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
I do want to turn to a related, although distinct aspect of this, which is that we were in the midst of an international crisis. People were trying to figure out if their family members were okay. They were trying to get on top of it. And if you were in Canada, you had a heck of a time getting access to this news on social media, specifically on Facebook. Now, if you were a Twitter user, there was actually a high volume of content coming out of the Middle East over the weekend. But on Facebook, there was nothing. News links were banned because, yet again, Bill C-18 has forced social media and tech companies into the untenable position of having to cut off the flow of information to avoid being strong-armed by the government and by the legacy media outlets. Kris Sims is normally with us on Mondays, but we had a bit of a day off for Thanksgiving, so she's with us now. Kris, obviously a horrific context for this, but whenever a crisis happens, it brings around, I think, exactly why C-18 has been such a dangerous piece of legislation.
Exactly, Andrew. You and I have spent enough time in newsrooms, both legacy media and our current, whatever our new media is that we're talking on right now, to understand that the government shouldn't be screwing this up. And they're at risk of screwing it up even more. And C-18, as you point out, we already see its effects with Facebook. So people can't, share news links. They can't comment on the non-existent news links and therefore share more information with each other. They then can't basically gather and grow and, commune with each other and share this information. And in more Canadian Taxpayers Federation contexts than normal times, that would usually mean something like about the carbon tax or being able to recall a politician who was, not keeping up their end of the bargain. But in this current context, it really puts into perspective how important it is to be able to have access to information and news media that you need. Now, Google is saying, yeah, you know what? We're probably going to side with Facebook here and we're going to do the same thing. So we have a deadline. I think it's December 19th. Okay. It's coming up very quickly with them saying we're not going to have news links to news stories posted on Google anymore. I'm curious. Google owns YouTube. Does that mean that there won't be any more news links on YouTube? That is how a lot of people, especially for my daughter's generation and a little bit older, that's their understanding of screen time. They don't have cable. They didn't grow up with bunny ears the way I did. They don't get any other form of information superhighway. That's their superhighway. What happens then? And so this is why we're saying the government needs to back right off of this C-18 because now it is directly affecting Canadians' access to information.
And I would just say on the Google thing, I mean, one of the points that I stress to people of all political persuasions is to never trust one particular source. I mean, I am very proud of the work that I do and I stand by it. And I love that people trust me and come to True North for their news. But I say you should verify anything and everything. Even the best meaning people get it wrong. Just to give one very pertinent example of this, at the beginning of the show, when I wanted to get the latest death toll, I went to Google and I said, Israel, Gaza, death toll. And I got 4 or 5 articles and I checked every single one of them to find the number. And there were distinctions between there based on the age of the story. So if Google were to take away those links, I would have to go to an individual site. I could go to the New York Times or BBC or Al Jazeera, True North, CNN. I could do that, sure. But I lose that ability to get that cross-section, which is exactly what the internet has been great for. And you move this to a Twitter context. Now, for the most part, X, as it's now called, has kind of managed to fly under the radar of the C-18 discussions, but it's not exactly clear that they'll get a pass on this.
No, it's not clear they're going to get a pass on that. And remember what feels now like a million years ago, like last Tuesday, when C-11 was really stomping all over us when it comes to things like podcasts and online shows. We need to stress that this isn't just podcasts. This is online shows. And does Twitter/X now qualify under that? Well, why wouldn't it? So their spaces are live. It's interactive. People are constantly getting interviewed on them. In some cases, it's hundreds of thousands of people listening. They have web videos on there all the time. They have audio on there all the time. That's content. That is content, according to what everything I've ever read under CRTC definitions. So then what happens? And to rewind, if people are missing what I'm saying here, remember back when C11 was passed, folks like you and me and Andrew and like lots of folks, not lots, some folks on the left in other podcast spaces were also warning about it as well, that C11 would alter Canadians' ability to choose what they want to see, hear, and share online. Now, it was floated as part of Canadian culture, Canadian heritage. The CRTC is just going to make sure that you see enough of CBC Gem promoted and enough moose meat recipes and ice hockey scores and all that great Canadian stuff. But the insidious and troubling part of this is that once you give the government the chance to regulate and downgrade what's visible to you, you've given them the ability to make things invisible to you. And so that means that Canadians, no matter where they're coming from on the political spectrum, will have a limited amount of news. Now, there's 2 regulations that have been released last week. The CRTC said, you know what? Any online body, to paraphrase, that hosts podcasts or programming or content now must register with the Trudeau government, the CRTC. Why? Because they're going to regulate them. The risk here, Andrew, is that why would big tech do this? In the same way that Meta said no thanks to C18 and now we can't see news on Facebook, what's in it for these big companies with the fractional Canadian audience by comparison? What's in it for them to put up with this headache with the Canadian government? It's very likely that they could just say, you know what, we're switching that part off, and then we'll be in the dark.
Yes, and I would also point out, I mean, when you discuss, Kris, and I think it's a very valid point that I hadn't really gotten around to thinking of in this particular context of promoting Canadian content. Well, we're talking about an international crisis that's happening right now here. I would say the highest value content in terms of understanding what's happening on the ground is going to be content that's produced closest to the source. When you log into YouTube, it's going to give you the CBC version, the CTV version, the global version. And that's not to say those outlets don't have stringers that they're using and reports from there, but it's a bias against everywhere else in the world that is being baked into the system, which is not the way the news is supposed to be.
No, and that's not the way that the internet has been since it started. It's always been in addition to and other than. So it's always been the ability to go straight to the source and watch something live, literally from somebody's phone now. You can just watch it happen. And so that has always been kind of the great equalizer. And again, to your point, by all means, watch legacy media, read legacy newspapers, watch alternative stuff, make up your own mind. The point here is now you're going to have the less and less and less ability to be able to check the internet and see what the news is and read what these alternative news sites are saying and watch these videos maybe right from the place that it's happening and make up your own mind and choose. And so this is where, to try to put a smile on people's faces, that's what former President Reagan meant when he said, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. No scarier words. This balance of alternative or independent online news media and legacy media's ability to share links on the internet and get its broadcast message out there, that was working fine. It didn't need the Trudeau government to come in there and fix and help and do stuff. But it's neck deep in it now. It's making a terrible mess of it. And they have got to realize this. They have got to stop and realize, whoa, we're doing way more harm than good here. We are limiting people's ability to get information. Sorry, we're backing off. That's what they need to do.
Yes, and I want to just speak on behalf of an independent outlet here, which is True North in my context. And I think we've had in the last few years a level of growth we're very grateful for, but we're still a small outlet that's unknown to a lot of people in Canada. What we rely on as an organization is for one of our stories or one of our shows to go viral and people start sharing it so it attracts new eyes, people that wouldn't necessarily go to www.TNC News in the morning to check out what's happening in the world, that learn of us that way. And that's what this has killed. It's killed that organic growth. No, They haven't taken us offline. They haven't banned us from being accessed just yet. But what they have done is they've limited the organic growth, and they've limited the organic growth of videos that you might do at the CTF, and they've limited the organic growth of outlets out there that are independent in nature that I've never heard of. Because CBC, CTV, the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, they have enough, street cred, for lack of a better term. They have enough name recognition that there are people that if you just tell them to go to a news website, they're probably going to remember one of those and go to it. We don't necessarily have that to the masses.
They're established.
Yes.
That's why they're the establishment. And that's why this is alternative, and it's growing, and it's new. So exactly to your point, Andrew, like that impulse you have, say you're talking to a normie friend of yours who's part of your family. Maybe
I don't have many normies or friends.
I know.
But carry on.
Many of them have bailed on me as well too. So, but say one had one, and say one we're talking about it over Thanksgiving dinner. That's where you can. That's that sort of impulse of that share, that sense of sharing on Facebook, sharing on X, sharing on the internet, being able to share that information and that article with your friends and family and old former colleagues and maybe high school people that you've been in touch with. Like, that's the whole point. That is the whole point of sharing information. And now our access to information is getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and there's no good reason for it. Like, I need to stress, because sometimes people just coming into the middle of a conversation might wonder, like, what kind of stuff are you guys wanting to be watching on the internet? Like, what are you afraid of? No, we're not talking about heinous criminal things, like terrible things that people want to be sharing on the internet that are against the criminal code, okay? Those things are already illegal. Andrew, if you and I started promoting that garbage right now between the two of us, we could be criminally charged in Canada for doing such things. That is part of the criminal code. That is not what C11 is about. C11 is about Canadian heritage. It is about content. It is about culture, okay? And that is the risk here, because they're trying to squeeze and stifle that, okay? And that is what is squeezing your access to information here. And then we have something like C18. So it's like this two-headed monster. We have C18, which is now literally blocking our ability to see and share news on one of the biggest social media platforms in Canada. I think the last stat I saw, something like 20 million Canadians have a Facebook account. That's enormous. And now they can't see news on it. And now Google just announced, you know what? We're not playing this game either. We're going to take our ball and go home. Folks, you need to contact your MP. I know there's a lot going on right now, but you need to tell your MP, hey, my access to news and information is a voting issue for me. You guys got to get this all repealed.
Kris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.